Hello, everyone. Greetings and welcome back to our In Conversation webinar series with Glasgow Declaration signatories. Today, we will be diving into a discussion with Seychelles Sustainable Tourism Foundation. We would like to talk about their efforts towards a climate resilient and sustainable tourism industry. I'm Virginia Fernandez Trapa. I'm program coordinator in the Sustainable Development of Tourism Department here at the World Tourism Organization, and I'm happy to host today's talk. I'd like to thank my colleague, Roxana Ashtari, for making the session possible, and of course to our guest, Victoria Alice. Thank you so much, Victoria. And Victoria is the manager at the Seychelles Sustainable Tourism Foundation. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me on behalf of SSDF. Really looking forward to the questions and to interacting with the participants here today.
Thank you, much appreciated. Would you mind starting by telling us a bit about the foundation? What do you do in the foundation? What's your role?
So I'm at the moment acting as let's say a general manager, and just trying to initiate and run projects and activities on behalf of the foundation. This is a foundation that started in 2017, so it's been around for a couple of years. It's a local NGO, and it started very small. It's still very small, but the reason why it came to life was to really act as a connecting platform for all tourism stakeholders in Seychelles. So really working with the public and private sector, working with academia, other NGOs, to really push forward a sustainable tourism agenda in the country, and really to facilitate, support, lobby, and just encourage sustainable tourism in Seychelles, which is a small island developing state, highly dependent on tourism, like most of the SIDS. It's over 60% of our GDP. So we saw there was a gap, because there are many NGOs in the country, but most of them are focused on marine conservation, and it's more biodiversity focused. And then we have other social based NGOs, but there wasn't anyone focusing on sustainable tourism. So we saw a gap, and we try to act as a connecting platform for the other stakeholders.
Thank you so much for that intro. Very interesting to learn a bit more about the foundation. We're happy to have you as a signatory of the Glasgow Declaration in your capacity as a supporting organization. As you remember, one of the pathways that we are promoting in Glasgow is the collaboration pathway. So I think the role that you just described fits perfectly well. We really need these platforms where we can exchange to exist, to be able to advance in a more efficient way. But let's get started with the interview. Congratulations on putting together your climate action plan, much appreciated. We will be focusing a bit on the process that you follow, developing it, and so on. But before going into the plan, perhaps I have more of a context-related question, because we read that your plan had been guided by the nationally determined contribution of the Seychelles, which we found a very interesting statement. For colleagues in the call, nationally determined contributions, you probably know, but these are the, let's say, climate plans that countries are submitting to the Paris Agreement, where they detail how they are going to contribute to the international climate goals that we all have, right, framed by the Paris Agreement. And actually, last year, we concluded a review of nationally determined contributions, where we saw a little bit of an increase in the number of references to tourism. We had looked at the NDCs back in 2019, if memory is not failing, and 42% of them were mentioning tourism. Now, in late 2022, we saw that it was 53% of the plans that mentioned tourism. And actually, most of the reference we found were related to the vulnerability of our sector. to climate change. Like so, I'm curious to know how did you make the link with the NDC in Seychelles, and can you tell us a bit about it?
Well, I mean, first off, we wanted to align ourselves with national strategic plans. So it made sense to look at the nationally determined contributions, which was submitted back in 2021 to UNFCCC. And myself, I was quite involved in the climate space as a youth. I was part of a team that had launched a local conference of youth, a Yongo registered event on empowering youth for climate action and really integrating youth in the development and implementation of the NDCs. So this kind of background and me having a foot in SSTF, I really wanted to try and build a connection between our tourism industry and what we're trying to build in terms of climate adaptation and mitigation. Because as I said, tourism in Seychelles is a key sector. It involves everyone, literally everyone, and I think it's a good keystone. I see it as a keystone sector that can really bring various stakeholders together in one room and kind of push the climate commitments that we've made as a nation. We can't achieve the goals without having tourism on board. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I went straight to the NDCs and I wanted to see what they had identified as gaps and as priorities. And as an NGO, and I think that's what NGOs are there for as well, it's to support what the strategic plans of the nation is. And the idea was to really see what is feasible as a small NGO and then practically what we could put in place in terms of activities to support achieve the commitments. So this is where we had identified, or we had seen that in the NDCs, Seychelles wanted to give or wants to give special attention to the engagement of small, medium enterprises in climate change adaptation, since SMEs are often less capable of adapting to climate change. So based on that, we agreed on that statement. We did ourselves identify that SMEs tend to be left on the side. We have quite large resorts in Seychelles. We have quite high-end luxury hotels, and large brands, multinational brands, which have the resources and have the capacity, and can bring aboard a sustainability manager. And so they definitely a lot more au fait with climate-related matters. And when it comes to we also have a label, a Seychelles Sustainable Tourism label, and when we look at the types of establishments that are certified, most of them are large establishments. We have very, very, very few, guest houses, self-caterings, or small hotels. So it's really trying to engage with these smaller actors in a more effective way, make them understand why tourism is vulnerable, why they are vulnerable to climate change impacts, but also how they can contribute to the solutions, how they form part of the solution actually. So we wanted to focus on that. The second bullet point that was highlighted in the NDCs was one of the commitments was to continue building local adaptation capacity in the tourism sector and the tertiary education institutions, such as the University of Seychelles and the Seychelles Tourism Academy. So these were the two institutes highlighted. And again, we felt strongly that, yes, we need to bring the youth, we need to bring the students that are studying tourism on board, make them realize the importance of linking climate action and tourism from an early stage. And the fact that it doesn't, because at the moment, there is only a sustainability module in the hotel management, but for the other students studying, spa and wellness, reception, food and beverage, tour guiding, they actually don't have, any sustainability modules, or they don't really address climate change. So we wanted to address that and see how we can bring these students on board and expose them to what Seychelles is doing in terms of climate adaptation and mitigation, and what they can do at their level in their specific field. So it's to really make them understand that they all have a role to play, no matter how small. At an individual level, we can always make a change. And then the third point in the NDCs was the Seychelles commitment is to increase the promotion and certification of tourism establishments under the SSTL. So again, as I said, the SSTL is a locally managed pool, which is GSTT recognized. But we have over 700 registered tourism accommodations, but there's only 20 odd accommodations that are certified. So there is a bit of a gap, and we wanted to see how we can work with the Department of Tourism, with the Ministry of Tourism, and just try to build capacity if needed, develop trainings that are specifically looking at SMEs, and identifying as well, like, what are the challenges and obstacles? Why are people not applying? Are people aware of what the SSDL is? Do they know how to apply? And so, we wanted to try and help build capacity. And also, these are not things we have started. We want to ideally do it next year, but we also want to create a network and a dialogue space for tourism establishments to discuss climate resilience matters and sustainability, share best practices, what they've learned through the SSDL. Has the SSDL benefited them? Not just like it's the right thing to do, but has it brought financial benefits? I think we've learned that we have to talk money. We have to talk to the private sector from a financial point of view. So it's really looking at these tools in a way where we don't want to sell it as you have to do it because it's the right thing to do and because it's an emergency, but we really want to try and get a buy-in because they really believe that it's going to benefit them as a business. So we're trying to take that approach.
Of course, I couldn't agree more. Just for clarification, SSTL is the Seychelles Sustainable Tourism Label.
Yes, sorry. Yes, it's
no worries. It's just sometimes also at the UN we use a lot of acronyms, and then people in the audience not necessarily are familiar with. So just to clarify that. Well, I find those this analysis that you did very, very pertinent, and all the elements that you have highlighted. I think they're quite strategic. Are these the same elements you have placed as core elements in your plan, or is there more in the plan? How did you define the core elements of your plan?
So these were based on these points that were highlighted in the NDCs. These acted as guidance to show us where we need to focus and how we want to orientate our activities. So in terms of our pillars, in terms of our focal areas, we are focusing on strengthening climate awareness and literacy, including the NDCs within the sector. And there again, because of what was mentioned in the NDCs and what we had observed ourselves from the previous years, we wanted to focus primarily on the private sector and academia. So this is why we, for example, in the month of September, we already started working with students from the Seychelles Tourism Academy and the University of Seychelles. We had organized a study tour on sustainable tourism and climate resilience. So that we've already started. Strengthening that climate awareness and literacy is one of the pillars. The second is initiating sustainability and climate-focused training. So that's something we haven't started yet, but we're meant to actually be doing a training in November and December, and then the plan is to continue next year. We will have to apply for more funding, but the plan is to continue trainings next year. And then the third pillar is really to develop tools to guide tourism-led climate action and sustainability best practices. So what we had also identified is there are certain tools and materials that have been developed by the Ministry of Tourism and other stakeholders, but it's still not enough. There's still a lot more to do. And we found that there aren't really, in terms of like very simple, practical leaflets or handbooks, whether it's for visitors or for boat charters. We haven't really seen that. So we really wanted to try and fill in that gap. Just to cite an example, one of the things we're working on now is developing a very simple, practical handbook for visitors before they enter Seychelles. So the idea is that in this little handbook, which we will do a workshop to invite the DMCs and tour operators and small hotels so that they can distribute it with their clients during the booking phase. But it's really to like indicate to visitors before they come, how can they prepare for a low impact holiday and more of a sustainable holiday. So what to bring, what not to bring, how can they support organizations and initiatives in the country? What do we recycle? What do we not recycle? Where are the redeem centers located? Are there any endangered species that they should be more wary about when it comes to our culinary experience in Seychelles? So all these things, there is information out there on the net, but it's kind of spread. So I can imagine people are not necessarily going to spend the time to do the research to get all of that. So we thought, okay, let's just try and bring that information in one location so that people can read through it in a very simple manner without too much text, and try to prepare their holiday to their best ability. And then sorry, the fourth, there is a fourth one, and the fourth pillar is just to really act as like I said in the beginning, to really act as this connecting platform to really facilitate the relationship between the different tourism stakeholders, which is why we did want to work not only with the establishments, but we also wanted to work with the boat charters. We wanted to also address the DMCs and tour operators, and then obviously the students from the different institutes, bringing in at the same time or working in collaboration with the Department of Tourism, because they also have a risk disaster management unit, and they are the ones managing the SSTL. So it's being managed under the ministry.
Very, very interesting points, and a good example of how a supporting organization signatory can outline a climate plan to basically dynamize tourism stakeholders that you work with and create room for exchanges on climate action. It's very interesting. What advice would you have for those that are just still thinking, how do I develop my plan, and that are perhaps also in the same situation, such as yourselves, an NGO?
I would say, the first thing is to really do a bit of a situational / gap analysis, just to see like who's doing what and how can you complement what is already happening, so that there's no duplication of work. The second is to align yourself with your country's strategic plan. So like we did with the NDCs. There may be other like documents out there that are relevant, but I would highly suggest to align yourself with strategic plans that have already been developed and are out there. Third would be to collaborate as much as possible with key stakeholders, and then I think that when it comes to tourism, collaboration and partnership is key, because it touches so many different sectors, and it's very cross-sectoral. And then the last one I would say is to just start small. I say this, but I'm sometimes the worst person. I tend to try and go too big, but I would just say, try to start small and see what you can kickstart. And then from there, build on those activities. So because on our end, like I said, we're a very, very small NGO, and the funding that we have at the moment is only valid for 4 months. So at the end of December, funding will be over, and the funding that we have secured is not that much. So I think it's in a way it's good because it's forcing us to take things step by step. So the original plan that we had submitted to this grant body there was so much going on, and then we had to break it down and remove a lot of the activities and objectives, which in a way is good. So I think, yeah, just taking it step by step, and then seeing how other NGOs can come in and support, because we know we've been kind of reaching out to colleagues left and right to see how they can come in, whether it's to facilitate a workshop, to review, a document, or to help with the graphics. I think it's just a question of, working with your existing colleagues and building that connectivity for the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, finance is also one of the pathways of the declaration. Just to, as a recap, measure, decarbonize, regenerate, collaborate, and finance. The way the finance pathway was defined was, let's say, to ensure that these signatories have capacity to implement the plans. I see how this can be a challenge for many, but I do believe you are in the right track. You have a plan. It's ambitious, but at the same time, it's realistic. Now, I'd suggest you focus on, as you're doing, one task after the other, and try to mobilize support from the private sector. Some of the initiatives you mentioned, I think, would be extremely valuable for them. So maybe investing a little bit of time in surveying potential sponsors for certain activities could be interesting. Victoria, if you agree, I'd like to check if anyone in the audience has a question for you.
Of course, yeah.
Dear colleagues, it's your turn now. You have questions, please raise the hand, and then we will bring you into the conversation. Don't be shy. It's been super interesting. Oh, great. Thank you. I see the hand of Thomas Armit. Thomas, please, can you use one sentence to introduce yourself so we know who you are? And then the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks so much, Virginia. Hi, Victoria. My name's Thomas. I work for an NGO called Planetera. We're a community tourism enterprise development organization. Very, very inspirational presentation there, Victoria. Really kudos to you and your team to have got this far, and it's much needed, especially in SID states. I have a couple of questions, but my first question is about fundraising. So what advice would you give to other similar organizations on how to fundraise for such impactful initiatives? I know that it's been a challenge for you, but you must have gone through a lot of kind of ways of doing it. So I don't know if you have any insights into that.
Thanks, Thomas, for the encouraging feedback and for the question. Funding is always a bit of it's always not a bit, it's always a challenge. For our climate action plan, the first set of funding has really come in 2 months ago, more or less. And this was, so I applied for a national grant. So it's Seychelles national grant. And I had already worked with them before. I had already applied with them before. So I already know, in terms of the reporting requirements and how they function. So I felt relatively comfortable in applying again to secure some funding. So from previous experience, we've mainly focused on grants. We haven't so much looked at private sponsorship, which is another way to do it. Also the other issue, because before we had the support from the corporate social responsibility, CSR, but then when COVID hit, the CSR was removed. So we actually no longer have CSR. It's no longer in the law. So that was a bit of that was another obstacle we had to face with. But yeah, I would say there's also crowdfunding, which we as a foundation have never tried, but we do have other NGOs in the country that have tried crowdfunding, and I think for most it's been quite successful. And then I think I was going to say it depends where you're based in the world and how your government works. But sometimes you can also get because some of these activities are things that falls under the mandate of certain ministries. So it's like you're not doing the work of the ministry, but because it's very much aligned, sometimes you can get some funding from government, or whether it's in-kind support or monetary support. But sometimes, it's worth reaching out to your ministry or to a governmental body and just to see how they can support.
Thank you, Veronica. Not an easy question, I have to say. It's always a challenge to raise funds for our activities, especially connected to environmental issues in tourism. But we have to keep trying, right? And most important is to be aware of your context, who's there. And I see some questions are popping up in the chat. I see, for example, Julia from Eco Union. She's saying, how do you suggest engaging the private sector? I don't think there's a recipe that can work for everybody, but Victoria said it, in the Seychelles, the number of large hotel chains is quite prominent. And these are companies, to my knowledge, that are engaged in CSR and on sustainability to a certain extent. So I think it could be quite interesting for them to be aware of the, let's say, support that, for instance, Victoria's Foundation could be providing in engaging maybe SMEs that are suppliers for these large chains, or maybe other stakeholders in the ecosystem. And also the piece on the consumer that you were mentioning, your idea to have some sort of leaflet informing the consumers. I don't know if it has been done. You mentioned you were looking at what exists, not to duplicate, so I'm assuming it doesn't. But it's finding the space to discuss and see if one of these companies could be supportive of these projects, for which the funding is, I would say, modest for this type of companies.
Also, maybe if I can just add on to that, in Seychelles, we have another association, so it's called the Seychelles Hospitality and Tourism Association, and they actually have quite a few members. I think they have like over 400 members or something like that. I think, in the 400s. So they already have a really good network, and they work differently from SSTF in the sense where they have a different model, and the members, they provide a service to their members, and they do quite a bit of trainings and capacity building. So it's actually another NGO that we wanted to pull in the climate action plan and have as a partner, as a key partner. But I think it's looking at whether you have existing associations that already have an existing network, and that provide a service. And I think it's to kind of piggyback on these initiatives and platforms to try and spread the word. Like, for example, there's the last year, the SHTA, so this association, had organized a series of trainings for small hotels. And then they brought me in to conduct sustainability trainings for their members. So, and of course, when I do a sustainability training, I'm always going to talk about climate change and climate adaptation and climate resilience. So that was like a little an open window to come in and try and spread the word and get the ball rolling.
Thank you, Victoria. Just one idea that came to mind, actually, thinking about yesterday's in conversation session. There was just a slightly different case, because there we were talking to a DMO, but Kyla was actually explaining to us how they shifted from being a non-profit into a social enterprise, so that they could, for instance, carry out consultancies on the side, and the surplus generated through the consultancy services, they were able then to reinvest in climate action activities that were led by the DMO. So once again, it's depending on the context, legal frameworks that apply to you, that you'd be able to maneuver. I think we have reached the time to end this conversation. Really appreciated, Victoria, your passion, your willingness to support more sustainable development of tourism in the Seychelles and accelerating climate action. as a supporting organization, your role is to try to multiply the number of entities that understand climate action, the number of entities that sign Glasgow to raise awareness. And I think those points are captured in the plan. Let's see how your plan advances through these years, and count on us for further exchanges. So I guess we stop here. Colleagues, thank you so much, and hoping to see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you to all the questions as well, and to everyone that joined in. And yeah, looking forward to meeting again. And yeah, thanks for everything.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye.
See you soon.